And thank you, Doug. Thank you for leading a great job of leading this effort. Scott will get into more of those thank yous in a minute. What I found interesting about the forum is while we talk total flood risk management, I find that in the nation, all of us are ready right now and want to talk foremost probably about risk communication more than anything else. Dennis reminds us it's not risk communication, it's family preparedness. But nevertheless, that's what we in the floodplain management business tend to call it. With that in mind, I look back on my experience and say, what significant positive change have I seen in behavior? We talk about changing behavior. I mean, this risk communication really is to change behavior. We're now talking about how do we change behavior. What have we really seen in the last 48 years I've been in this business? That's positive change in behavior. And the one that comes to the top of my list is the acquisition relocation of properties out of floodplains. I was involved in one of the first such projects in Soldiers Grove, Wisconsin in 1978. That, you might recall, was a time when people said, you cannot go out and voluntarily buy properties because people won't sell you their house. They're river rats, and they're going to stay there. Well, in Soldiers Grove kind of said, when the Corps of Engineers said, we're going to build you a levee, Soldiers Grove said, wait a minute, you want to turn us from a poor, rundown, dying community subject to flooding into a poor, rundown, dying community not subject to flooding. No thanks. Instead, they did an acquisition, relocation, incorporated energy, and you probably all read the story. You know the story. That was a beginning, followed by the way, the Corps did almost simultaneously one about 30 miles away in Prairie du Chien, where the Corps actually acquired property rather than build a levee around the Fourth Ward in Prairie du Chien, and instead relocated 150 homes. Lots of stories behind that one. Nevertheless, it wasn't really until the floods of 1993 that this paradigm changed. That was when FEMA said, we're going to, HMGP finally was coming into being used after been there for a number of years and not really utilized. And James Lee and the crowd made the decision that we will use HMGP funds, which got, as you know, got modified to up the percentage and the rest, but essentially we're not going to use it for anything structural. It's only going to be used for acquisition relocation. We managed to change that behavior of people not wanting to leave the floodplain, move out of the floodplain by saying, you just got flooded. We're going to give you the world's best offer. We're going to give you the value of your house before it got flooded. It's either that or you get nothing. You get essentially some IA. That changed behavior. People said, I'd be pretty stupid not to take that buyout. And they did. And we found out that acquisition relocation could work on a large scale. And since then, it's now become part of what we do. It's one of our significant tools in the toolbox for mitigating damages to existing structures. As Ed talks about, there are two kinds of mitigation. One is that mitigating, how do we mitigate what already exists? And now we're doing that on a large scale. FEMA's done that for what? I don't know, what's the number now? 35,000 structures? Something like that. So there's a behavior change that we've managed to effectuate through policy process. The part of the mitigation that we haven't changed behavior on is creating tomorrow's disaster. That continues. So we've got a lot of work to do, and we talked a lot about that here in the last 2 days. Some fabulous ideas. It strikes me that, again, we're talking to the choir. We all recognize that floodplains and coastal high hazard areas are high hazard areas. We have obviously not yet convinced the public that that's the case. But we're not sure that's because they don't recognize that or because there's lots of incentives to do otherwise. We've talked about all those things here in the last 2 days, and we'll try to sort that out and set some paths forward that we can all hopefully follow, which is what we try to do in these forums. And I think this continuum of the 3 forums that we've done have worked well together, and I'm sure Doug will make sure the next one does too. So perhaps if we can build off some of those obvious things, like there are high hazard areas. One of the things that maybe we should consider, Gilbert always said one of his biggest concerns with the National Flood Insurance Program was that it was implemented nationwide instantly. It bothered him tremendously that the program was not done with a pilot here and a pilot there to try and work out some of the bugs and modify the program before it got implemented. But it was implemented nationwide. And frankly, those bugs never did get worked out, a few at a time, but there's a lot of that could have been. And maybe one of the things that we've talked about, all those indicators and so on we've talked about, I like the approach of pilot watersheds, to look at some of those, pick some, a series of different kinds of watersheds and try out some of these to try and find out what those true indicators are and how, and then ultimately get down to these things that we might change some behaviors. You've given us some great ideas and thoughts. As we go forward, we'll be incorporating those. That will fall to the planning team. We'll hope to do that, and we'll have a report out as soon as we can get it out. My guess is that'll be sometime this fall. In the meantime, things like the presentations for Dennis and Gene and the rest, we'll get up on the website as soon as we can get them up, because I know there are some people that managed to come in a little bit late and catch and miss some of those, and we'll want to catch them, so we'll try to get those up as quick as we can. I'll give you my personal thanks to all of you for being here. And with that, let me turn it over to Scott Edelman, the president of the foundation.